Your father left everything to me, the house, the business, every investment account, all of it, my stepmother Margaret announced triumphantly to the assembled family, waving a crisp document like a victory flag over my father's fresh grave. You and your siblings get nothing. He told me himself that his first family was a disappointment, and he wanted to ensure I was taken care of properly. This will make his wishes perfectly clear. My brother David and sister Elena sat stunned on either side of me, their faces cycling through grief to shock to devastation, while Margaret's son Bradley smirked from the corner of the room. But why did I lean forward with calm interest instead of collapsing like my siblings? And why did my brief glance at the document's watermark make me reach for my briefcase rather than my tissues? May I see that? I asked, extending my hand. Margaret hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough. Why? It's legally binding. The attorney verified everything. Which attorney? Dad's attorney is David Okonkwo. He's been the family lawyer for 30 years. Your father changed attorneys. He wanted someone who understood his new priorities. How convenient. The document, please. She handed it over with a confidence that faltered as I held the paper up to the light. The watermark was clear. Office Depot Premium Multipurpose Paper. Available at any office supply store for $12.99 per ream. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a different document, heavy cotton bond, embedded security watermark, the letterhead of Okonkwo and Associates Legal Services. My father's actual will, I said, was signed the day before he died. I was one of the witnesses. David Okonkwo has the original, but this certified copy should clarify a few things. Margaret's face went from triumphant to terrified in approximately 3 seconds. My father had warned me about Margaret 2 years before his death. The warning had come during one of our private conversations, the kind we'd started having after his diagnosis, when mortality had stripped away the polite fictions families maintained to avoid conflict. I made a mistake with her, Vivian. I was lonely after your mother died, and Margaret made me feel wanted. I didn't realize until too late that what she wanted wasn't me. What did she want? What she's always wanted. Security. Status. Money. I was a means to an end. Then divorce her. It's not that simple. She's been building alliances for years. Her family, her friends, even some of our business partners, they all see me as the villain if I leave. She's constructed a narrative where she's the devoted second wife and I'm the ungrateful widower, so what do? We plan. Carefully. Legally. We make sure that when I'm gone, she gets what's fair, but not what she thinks she deserves. The planning had taken 18 months. My father and I met with David Okonkwo dozens of times, constructing an estate plan that would be bulletproof against the challenges we anticipated. The key was documentation. My father's mental competency was evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists over an 8-month period. Video recordings captured his instructions to the attorney, his explanations of his decisions, his explicit rejection of any arrangement that would disinherit his children from his first marriage. I want Margaret to have the house, he'd said during one recorded session. She's lived there for 12 years. That's fair. And $500,000 from the life insurance, enough to live comfortably. And the business? The business goes to my children. Vivian, David, and Elena built Patterson Industries alongside me. Margaret never worked a day there. She doesn't understand it, doesn't care about it, she just sees dollar signs. The current valuation? About $4.7 million. Split equally among my 3 children. And if your wife contests these provisions? Then the video recordings come out. The competency evaluations get submitted to the court. And my daughter Vivian, who's been preparing for exactly this possibility, handles the legal response. I was a corporate attorney. Estate litigation wasn't my specialty, but I knew enough to be dangerous, and I knew enough to bring in specialists when needed. Margaret hadn't known about any of this. She'd spent the final 2 years of my father's life positioning herself as the grieving caretaker, the devoted wife, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to care for her dying husband. The reality was different. She'd hired private nurses so she wouldn't have to provide care herself. She'd gradually isolated him from old friends, claiming he needed rest rather than visitors. She'd intercepted mail, managed his phone calls, controlled his access to anyone who might influence his estate decisions. But she'd underestimated 2 things, my father's determination to protect his children, and my ability to maintain secret contact despite her surveillance. The burner phones had been David's idea. Prepaid, untraceable, switched out monthly. My father and I had communicated through them for 18 months while Margaret believed she controlled all his connections to the outside world. She thinks I'm senile, he told me during one of our calls. She talks about me like I'm not in the room. She's already making plans for after I'm gone. What kind of plans? Remodeling the house. Selling the business. moving Bradley into management positions he's not qualified for. He'd laughed bitterly. She doesn't realize I'm aware of everything she says. The nurses she hired? They report to me, not her. I pay their salaries, and they have no loyalty to the woman who treats them like servants. The forged will had been discovered 3 days before he died. Margaret had left her laptop open while she was in the shower, and my father, whose dementia was considerably less advanced than she believed, had reviewed her files. The document was sophisticated. She'd studied his signature, practiced the handwriting, even obtained legal paper that approximated what an attorney might use. But she'd made mistakes. The watermark was wrong. The signature, while close, showed hesitation marks that a forensic analyst would catch immediately. And the content, leaving everything to Margaret and specifically disinheriting the children with insulting language, bore no resemblance to how my father actually thought or spoke. She's been planning this for months, he told me in our final conversation. Maybe years. She was just waiting for me to die. We'll stop her. I know. That's why I'm telling you, make sure the real will is unassailable. Make sure David has every piece of evidence secured. And make sure you're in that room when she tries to pull this. I'd been in the room. Sitting between my siblings, watching Margaret perform her triumphant announcement, waiting for the moment when her house of cards would collapse. That moment had arrived. This is absurd, Margaret said, her voice rising. That document is a forgery. Your father was confused at the end, he didn't know what he was signing. He knew exactly what he was signing. There are video recordings of every session with the attorney. 3 independent psychiatric evaluations confirming his mental competency. You coerced him. You manipulated a dying man. I visited my father regularly with your knowledge and permission. What manipulation occurred during supervised visits with his wife present? Margaret's face shifted through several calculations. The visits you're referring to happened before his condition deteriorated. This will, she gestured at my document, was supposedly signed recently, when he was clearly incapacitated. The will was signed on October 14th of this year. Dad died on October 15th. On October 13th, Dr. Patricia Harrison conducted a competency evaluation that specifically confirmed his capacity to make legal decisions. Would you like to see that report? I pulled another document from my briefcase. Dr. Harrison is a board-certified neuropsychiatrist. She's testified in over 200 competency cases. Her evaluation was thorough, documented, and videotaped. Margaret looked at the report, then at her son Bradley, then at the document she'd believed would make her wealthy. This can't be happening. It's happening. And it gets worse. The additional documents I'd brought painted a comprehensive picture. Bank records showing Margaret had transferred $340,000 from my father's accounts into her personal accounts over the past 18 months, transfers he hadn't authorized and hadn't known about until we discovered them together. Email communications between Margaret and Bradley discussing their plans for after conversations that included explicit references to the forged will and how to make it seem legitimate. Testimony statements from the private nurses describing Margaret's treatment of my father, her attempts to limit his medication, her discussions about when this will finally be over. You've been committing fraud for at least 2 years, I said, laying out each document. Financial fraud, elder abuse, and now attempted inheritance fraud through a forged document. Any one of these would be criminal. Together, they constitute a pattern that prosecutors will find very interesting. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it. Dad and I have been building this case since he first realized what you were doing. Every document is authenticated. Every witness is prepared to testify. Every piece of evidence has been independently verified. Margaret sat down heavily, her triumph evaporating into terror. What do you want? The question revealed everything about who she was. Not, this isn't true. Not, I would never. Not even, let me explain. Just, what do you want? She was negotiating. Even now, caught with overwhelming evidence of multiple crimes, her first instinct was to calculate what price might make this go away. What I want, I said, is for my father's actual wishes to be honored. The house and $500,000 go to you, that's what he specified. Everything else goes to his children. That's barely anything compared to what the business is worth. That's more than you deserve after stealing from him for 2 years. I was his wife. I took care of him. You hired people to take care of him and then intercepted his contact with his children. That's not caregiving. That's isolation. He wanted to change things. He told me what he actually wanted. Repeatedly. On video. With psychiatric verification of his competency. I gathered my documents. Here's how this is going to work. You can accept the provisions of the real will, return the money you stole, and walk away with the house and the insurance payment. Or I can take everything to the police, the district attorney, and civil court simultaneously. And if I contest the real will? Then the videos come out. The competency evaluations get filed. The evidence of your fraud becomes public record. Your reputation, whatever's left of it, gets destroyed. And you probably go to prison. Bradley attempted to intervene. You can't threaten my mother like this. We'll sue for harassment. Bradley, I have emails between you and your mother discussing the forged will. You're a co-conspirator in fraud. If anyone files charges, you'll be included. He went pale. We were just talking. We never actually. You never actually what? Forged a legal document? Because your mother just waved it in front of witnesses. You never actually planned to steal an inheritance? Because your emails are quite explicit about your intentions. Those emails were taken out of context. Feel free to explain the context to a jury. My siblings had been watching this unfold with varying expressions. David, the middle child, looked devastated, not by Margaret's betrayal, but by the confirmation that our father's final years had been spent battling someone who should have been his partner. Elena, the youngest, looked furious, the protective rage of someone who trusted their stepmother and now realized that trust had been systematically exploited. Did Dad know? Elena asked quietly. Did he know how bad it was? He knew everything. He spent his last 2 years making sure we'd be protected. Why didn't he tell us? Because he wanted you to have whatever relationship you could with Margaret. He didn't want his suspicions to poison your interactions if he turned out to be wrong. But he wasn't wrong. No, he wasn't. The settlement took 3 weeks to finalize. Margaret accepted the terms of the real will. She had no choice, given the evidence against her. She received the house, which was worth approximately $800,000, and the $500,000 life insurance payment. She also signed a confession to the financial fraud, which would be held in escrow. If she ever contested the will, attempted to contact us for money, or made any public statements impugning my father's memory, the confession would be released to authorities. It wasn't forgiveness. It was containment. You're letting her get away with it, David said after the papers were signed. I'm letting her walk away with $1.3 million instead of $5 million. And I'm ensuring she can never come after us again. But the fraud, the elder abuse. If we pursue criminal charges, this becomes a multi-year legal battle that consumes our lives and resources. Dad wanted us to move forward, not get trapped in litigation. So she wins? She survives. That's not the same as winning. Patterson Industries was divided equally among the three of us. The company our father had built over 40 years, the business Margaret had seen only as a dollar sign, became ours to steward into the next generation. David took over operations, applying the management experience he'd gained working alongside Dad for 15 years. Elena handled the creative side, the design and marketing that had always been her strength. I managed legal and financial matters, ensuring the company was protected from the kinds of threats we'd just survived. The transition wasn't seamless. Nothing ever is. But we'd been prepared for this responsibility by a father who'd trusted us with his legacy. Margaret sold the house within 6 months. She moved to Florida, as far from us as she could reasonably get, and we heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd remarried, another widower, another man of means. I wondered sometimes if I should warn him. If I should share what we knew about who she really was. But my father's voice echoed in my memory, focus on building, not destroying. Let her go. I let her go. The videos my father made during those final months became something unexpected. Not evidence in a legal case, that had never been necessary. But a record of who he really was, what he really thought, how he really felt about the children he was leaving behind. We watched them together on the first anniversary of his death. I'm proud of all 3 of you, his recorded voice said. Vivian, for being strong enough to handle what's coming. David, for being steady enough to keep the business running. Elena, for being kind enough to keep us all human. I wish I could have given you a better stepmother. I wish the end of my life hadn't been shadowed by this conflict. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, never stopped planning for your future, never stopped believing that you'd be okay. Margaret thought I was weak at the end. She thought she could manipulate me because I was sick. What she never understood is that I was strongest when I was protecting my children. That's what parents do. We sacrifice. We plan. We prepare. The will she tried to use was her attempt to steal your future. The will I actually wrote is my attempt to secure it. Trust each other. Take care of each other. And remember that family isn't about blood or law, it's about choosing to love people even when it's hard. The watermark on Margaret's forged will became something of a family joke. Office Depot premium multipurpose paper, Elena would say when someone did something obviously fraudulent. Available at fine retailers everywhere. But beneath the humor was a serious lesson. Margaret had underestimated us. She'd seen grieving children and assumed we were too emotional to examine evidence carefully. She'd seen a dying man and assumed he was too weak to protect his legacy. She'd seen an opportunity and assumed no one had planned for her betrayal. She'd been wrong on every count. My father's grave sits in a small cemetery near the house where we grew up. I visit monthly, sometimes more often. I tell him about the business, about his grandchildren, about the life he made possible through his careful planning. I tell him Margaret got what the will specified, not what she wanted, but what he determined was fair. I tell him his children are thriving. I tell him we miss him. The last thing I do, every visit, is touch the headstone and repeat the words he said to me during our final conversation. "Thank you for believing in me." He'd said it to me, thanking me for believing he wasn't as weak as Margaret assumed, for believing his plan would work, for believing we could protect his legacy together. I say it to him now, thanking him for believing I could handle what was coming, for believing his children were worth fighting for believing that love could outlast even death. The headstone is cold under my fingers. But the memory is warm. She waved the will like a trophy, announcing that my father had left everything to her and nothing to his children. The triumphant smile. The smirking stepson. The devastated siblings who believed they'd been disinherited by a father who'd loved them. But I'd noticed the watermark, Office Depot paper, the kind you buy for $12.99 per ream. The real will was in my briefcase, signed the day before he died, witnessed by his attorney of 30 years, supported by video recordings and psychiatric evaluations and 18 months of careful planning. My father had known what Margaret was. He'd prepared for her betrayal. And he'd trusted me to expose it when the moment came. The moment came. The watermark told the story. And Margaret learned that the dying man she dismissed as weak had been strongest when protecting his children.